Hi, welcome to 60 for 30, a Magic the Gathering project where we look to get you a 60 card Magic deck for just around $30. There are plenty of other budget Magic projects out there. This one's, I would consider, an ultra budget version. Today we're going to be looking at a modern deck that you may or may not have heard of, Modern Affinity. So this deck's great as a budget deck because there are these core cards that are going to show up in your competitive Affinity builds that aren't very expensive and can also be the core of our super budget list. So we run 4 Ornithopters. The most significant part about this card is that it costs 0, but it's also flying and has 2 toughness, which is decent. Memnite, a 1/1 for 0. Signal Pest, a 1-drop 0/1 creature that buffs other creatures when it attacks and can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach, so it essentially has flying on offense. Vault Skirge, which we're not running any black in this deck, so this Phyrexian mana will always cost 2 life, but so it's essentially you pay 1 mana, 2 life, and you get a 1/1 flyer with lifelink. And then we also run Welding Jar. I'll talk more about why later, but the most simple reason is that it helps keep our artifact creatures alive once we load them up as a threat. And then these threats. Cranial Plating is one of the main threats that you'll see in the quote-unquote real Affinity build. The equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control, which ideally with all our low-cost artifacts should be somewhere in the realm of 5 or 6. And you put that on an Ornithopter, or a Signal Pest, or a Vault Skirge, and the opponent dies really quickly. We're also going to be running Ensoul Artifact. It's a 2-drop enchantment that turns an artifact creature into a 5/5 creature. That's it. It doesn't even have to be an artifact creature, so you can put this on a Welding Jar. You can put this on a Vault Skirge, and it's a 5/5 flying lifelink creature that can be attacking on turn 2, which is pretty decent. It is an enchantment, so if they kill the creature that it's attached to, you're going to lose the Ensoul Artifact, which is where our Welding Jars come in and are important. And we also are going to run Illusory Angel. This is a bad card, because you can only cast it if you've cast another spell this turn, but it actually works pretty darn well in Affinity, because you have so many cards that cost 0, so as long as you hold one of those cards, this card can come out on turn 3, and then it's a 4/4 flyer, passes the Bolt test. It isn't an artifact, so if they have artifact hate that they sideboard in, it's not going to hit the Angel. It's not amazing, but it has actually surprised me in how well it's tested, so I'm actually a big fan of Illusory Angel in this deck. We also get to play some pretty ridiculous utility spells as a result of having all of our artifacts. The first of these is Thoughtcast, which costs 5 to draw 2 cards at sorcery speed, which is not good, but it costs 1 less for each artifact we control, so more often than not, this will be 1 blue for draw 2 cards, which is huge in an aggro deck, which we are, because it helps us refill at a really good rate. We get to run Galvanic Blast, which is essentially a shock. For 1 mana, you're going to do 2 damage to target creature or player, but if we control 3 artifacts or more, it's going to do 4 damage, making it a better lightning bolt, which will almost always have the Metalcraft version of this. And then we also have Shrapnel Blast, a 2-drop instant where you sacrifice an artifact to do 5 damage to a creature or player. And then our lands, Darksteel Citadel is indestructible, which makes it a pretty good target for Ensoul Artifact, because then you have a 5/5 indestructible creature. But it also adds to the artifact count, since it's an artifact land, and then our basic red and blue. We're running very little land, because we have a very, very low mana curve to this deck. So then some deck notes for you guys. We are an aggressive deck, and never forget it. You can grind some games out, but ideally you want to be winning turn 4, turn 5, turn 6. If it goes much longer than that, you're probably not having a great game. Remember to hold a card for Illusory Angel. because nothing's worse than drawing that and wishing that you could play it, but you're empty except for that card, so you can't play it until hopefully next turn if you don't draw a land. So hold a Welding Jar, hold a Memnite, hold an Ornithopter. If those cards aren't going to be getting you ahead at the time, just hold one of them. It's really important to think about how we're using our Galvanic Blasts and our Shrapnel Blasts as removal versus reach. Sometimes you will want to use them as removal. Most of the time, though, since we're trying to play fast and race the decks, those cards are actually just going to be reach damage. I've had games where I have like 2 Galvanic Blasts and 1 Shrapnel Blast, and you just come out of nowhere for, like 13 damage on the end of their turn into your turn, and people don't see it coming. The price point, this one's great. It's actually only about $23 in paper from TCG Player, and less than $2 in tickets from Card Hoarder online. So if you want to play it online and see how it works before you buy it on paper, it's going to cost you almost nothing. And like I said, the core to this deck is essentially the same core as you'll see in modern Affinity lists, minus some very expensive cards that look like this. The Affinity decks are obviously better with these cards, and you can slowly add them and upgrade your list over time. But this is why we need a budget list, and why a budget list that looks kind of the same is so cheap when the actual deck is so expensive, because most of the cost of Affinity is tied up in Arcbound Ravengers and your Mox Opals, which you run playsets of. So your playsets of Mox Opals right now is going to be over $200. Arcbound Ravager will be about $150 for 4 of them. Steel Overseer is more reasonable, but again, our goal is to hit $30, so 3 of these would eat up our whole budget. And Blinkmoth Nexus isn't going to break a bank, but we're going to play 4 of them. It adds up. So these are the upgrades that you want to run over time if you want to slowly add them to your deck. But the deck that I showed you actually runs quite well, and you should have decent success with it, especially for a $23 deck. That's it. That's our super budget modern Affinity. I hope you have fun. It's a deck that can do some really cool stuff and has some really unfair things in it when you're attacking on turn 3 with like a 7/1 Vault Skirge with lifelink that's flying. It feels pretty good. So I hope you enjoy it. I've enjoyed testing it. And I look forward to seeing you guys for our next video. Make sure, we're a new channel. Do me a favor and subscribe. This project's fun for me, so I'm not really trying to get too much out of it, but it does feel nice when I have 3 or 4 views. So tell your friends to watch, tell your friends to subscribe, just so that I don't eventually get bored and quit on this project. I want you guys to hold me accountable. Thanks guys, I really appreciate it. Best of luck out there. Thanks for watching.